Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we are upgrading the World Shaper Precon. We're taking 23 cards out and putting 23 cards in. Now I don't think this deck is bad out of the box, but you know me, whenever I do a Precon upgrade, we're going to take at least 20 cards out, maybe even 15 at the least. That way you end up with a completely new deck. It's going to feel upgraded, and we're going to do this on a pretty solid budget as well. So if that sounds like something you guys want to get into, stay tuned. Don't forget to click on all the links in the description down below. You guys can get a free $15 whenever you click on that whatnot link. You guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you click on that link. I do have a Patreon if you guys do like the content and want to support me. Another thing that just supports me is liking, commenting, and subscribing. So to all the people doing that, I appreciate that as well. Let's get right into this Precon upgrade. Before we get into the upgrades, I just wanted to explain my vision for the deck because it might be different from the Precon, and that's why we're taking so many cards out. Now, I will say the core is very solid. There's a lot of very powerful things we can do with this Precon just because of the cards they put in it. We have Omnath, we have a lot of cards that trigger whenever we sacrifice lands that generate some massive tokens, and that's basically the goal of this deck. You want to sacrifice your lands, bring them all back, trigger all your landfall effects, and trigger all of your effects that care about us sacrificing permanents, and that's going to generate instant value and an instant board state 9 times out of 10 that allows us to hit our opponents in the face for a ton of damage. Now, I will say the thing I noticed that the deck was missing was just that explosiveness and just that consistency that I wanted. And there's two things that are going to give us that explosiveness and consistency. One, cards that allow us to play more additional lands, and then two, cards that allow us to play land cards from our graveyard. Now, there are already cards in the deck that allow us to do that, but the redundancy isn't there, right? I want to be doing this every single game consistently, and with these upgrades, we're going to ensure that that is going to happen. So with that being said, let's get into the first things I added. Tireless Provisioner and Lotus Cobra. Essentially, what these are going to allow us to do is generate a mana whenever lands enter the battlefield. So whenever we're sacrificing, I don't know, 6 lands to our sacrifice effects, and then bringing them all back with an Aftermath analysis, it's going to generate us a ton of mana. Aftermath is already in the deck, so it's definitely going to be amazing with this strategy. It also just makes sense, right? If we're including more cards that allow us to sack our lands, like Sylvan Safekeeper and Zoran Orb, which are another card or more cards that I'm going to be adding to this deck, it's just going to make it to where you're generating mana this way. So now we tap a land for mana, sacrifice it, and play it from the graveyard, netting us even more mana. This kind of makes it to where, let's say we only have 1 land in hand, but we have 3 different effects on the battlefield that allow us to play additional land cards from our hand. Eventually, you'll just end up with not enough lands to take a full advantage of all of those effects. But whenever we have a card that allows us to play land cards from our graveyard and a sack outlet that sack lands, let's say we can play 3 lands and we have 0 lands in our hand. Now we can tap 3 mana with our lands, sacrifice those 3 lands, and then play all 3 lands from the graveyard. This triggers all of our sacrifice triggers and all of our landfall triggers in one fell swoop. So that's why I'm going to add these to the deck just to make it more consistent. With that being said, we also need more ways to play additional lands. So Wayward Swordtooth I think is amazing. This is a 3 CMC creature dinosaur with Ascend, so it can't attack unless it has the City's Blessing. But it says you may play an additional land in each of your turns, and it's a 5/5 for 3 mana, which is amazing because we are trying to put as many charge counters on our commander as possible because we want to get to that ability that allows us to sacrifice our lands for some card advantage while allowing us to play additional lands. So this just seems like a solid include. Loot is also a very cheap way to play additional lands. It also has an ability for 6. We can look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from among them and put it onto the battlefield. Put the rest at the bottom in a random order. So now not only are we cheating lands into play, cheating creatures into play, we're also getting to play additional lands. From there, we need more ways to play land cards from our graveyard. Ramana Excavator, Ancient Green Warden, and Conduit of Worlds seemed like the most solid adds. Conduit of Worlds is a little iffy, but it has saved my ass in a couple games. It has an ability that we can choose target non-land permanent you control from your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast an additional spell this turn, activate only as a sorcery. So now we can tap this and cast 1 spell per turn. Again, not the greatest, but in a scenario where you have to cast that spell or lose the game, you'd rather cast the spell, right? Ancient Green Warden is solid. Again, this allows you to play additional lands from your graveyard, and additionally, it says if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control, that ability triggers an additional time. So now doubling up on all of our landfall effects, sign me up. And then Ramanok Excavator is just a boring 3 CMC creature that allows us to play land cards from our graveyard, but he is welcomed in this deck, make no mistake. Voltaic Construct is another card that's unique to this strategy that I think is just really broken in this deck. Let's set up a scenario. First of all, this is a 4 CMC artifact creature golem that has the ability pay 2 untap target artifact creature. Our commander is an artifact creature as long as it has enough charge counters on it. And then remember, our commander has that broken ability where we can pay 1, sacrifice a land, draw 2 cards, and play an additional land. So now let's set up a scenario where we have an Ancient Green Warden on the battlefield along with a Lotus Cobra, and then we have our Voltaic Construct here. What's going to happen here is we sacrifice a land, putting it into the graveyard. Now we can play it from the graveyard because our commander says we can play an additional land, right? So we play that land card from the graveyard, we generate 2 mana off the Lotus Cobra because now all of our landfall effects are doubled, we pay 2 to untap our commander, and then we tap the same land we played this turn from the graveyard to activate our commander again, drawing us 2 additional cards. That's a loop, and now we can draw our entire library by just including cards that are super synergistic in this deck. We're not including like a weird card that does nothing, right? Voltaic is still a solid card that you would play in this deck just to pay 2, untap your commander, and draw 2 more cards and play an additional land. Like I said, this card's amazing, specific to the strategy, but I think it should go in this deck. The Gitrog Ravenous Ride. Now this is a bit of a guilty include because I absolutely love this card, but for 5 CMC, you get a legendary Frog Horror mount that has trample and haste. Whenever the Gitrog Ravenous Ride deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that saddled it this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power, and it just has saddled 1. So if we saddle this with a 5 power creature, we're drawing 5 cards and have the ability to put 5 land cards from our hand onto the battlefield. Not only does this trigger all of our landfall, it also draws us a ton of cards, and it gives us more lands to sacrifice for all of our effects that care about us sacrificing those lands. This is a perfect include as well. Again, a little bit guilty because I love this card, but I think it's going to work here. Greater Good is also another card, one of my staples, especially in Jund decks, and especially decks that generate a lot of fodder, and this deck generates a lot of fodder. This is a card that allows you to sacrifice a creature and draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then you discard 3 cards. In a deck that's running Mesarek and Rampaging Ballast, you can easily generate a board state of 4/4s, and that board state of 4/4s can easily turn into a board state of 7/7s very quickly. So now you're able to sacrifice those 7/7s to draw 7 cards and discard 3 cards, and as long as you're discarding lands, we can easily play them again from the graveyard. Again, just perfect here. Elemental Bond is also a card I'm including here because of all the landfall that's going to be happening in this deck, and all of the token generation that's going to be happening whenever we're sacrificing lands as well. It says whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you just get to draw a card. So now every time Rampaging Ballast triggers, we get a 4/4 and we get to draw a card. Kind of insane here. It really works well with this scenario where we're just sacrificing an infinite amount of lands. I guess we win the game anyway there because our commander allows us to go ahead and deal 2 damage, or our opponents lose 2 life whenever we sacrifice the land, so never mind, we do just win the game there. But anyway, I do think it is useful to have in this deck just for solid value. Another card that adds solid value to the deck while also enabling some other comboing potential is Springheart Nantuko. This is a 2 CMC enchantment creature, Insect Monk. It has Bestow 2, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 if Springheart Nantuko is attached to a creature you control. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. So it's another landfall ability that can also generate tokens of our creatures. Aftermath Analysis is going to love this. Now we can generate token copies of Aftermath Analysis and sacrifice all of our lands to then sacrifice the Aftermath Analysis to bring all of those lands back. If we have a Lotus Cobra effect on the battlefield and can generate up to 6 mana, that just goes infinite and we can kill the entire table with our commander's life loss ability. Pretty broken there. Nahiri's Lithoforming is also a card that I thought was pretty solid in this deck. You can pay X and then it costs 2 red, sacrifice X lands. For each land sacrificed this way, you get to draw a card. You may play X additional lands this turn. Lands you control enter the battlefield tapped this turn. Now, why I like this card in this deck is because we're able to play land cards from our graveyard, right? So if we sacrifice 5 lands, we're going to get to draw 5 cards, and then we can play all 5 of those lands from our graveyard, triggering all of our land sacks, all of our land ETB abilities, and drawing us a ton of cards. This card can be incredibly explosive in this deck. Will of the Sultai is another way we can bring all of our lands back. This is a 5 CMC sorcery that says choose one. If you control your commander as you cast the spell, you may choose both. Target player mills 3 cards, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It also says put X 1/1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of lands you control. It gains trample until end of turn. This is also amazing for our Powers Matter strategy that we're kind of leaning into a little bit, right? Put a ton of counters on something, have the Gitrog sacrifice it, draw a ton of cards, put a ton of lands into play, and then you're off to the races, right? Chainer Nightmare Adept is very good in this deck. It's a 4 CMC legendary human minion. It says discard a card. You may cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. Activate this only once each turn. I like this here because you can discard your land cards that you were going to play anyway, and since we have a ton of cards that allow us to play land cards from our graveyard, it's at no loss to us. We can easily just discard the land, cast the creature, and then play the land card from the graveyard. I'm in love with this. It also says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste until end of turn. So it also gives all of our reanimation targets haste, which is just added cherry on top. Evolutionary Witness has a couple of broken interactions in the deck. It's a creature elf mutant that has adapt 2, which means you can put 2 1/1 counters on it. And then it has the broken ability, whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Evolutionary Witness, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So whenever we're talking about Mezarek already being in the deck, and also the other commander that allows us to put a 1/1 counter on something whenever we sacrifice a permanent, it's not hard to see where this just turns into, hey, your hand is now your graveyard because you can cast all permanent cards from it as long as we're able to put counters on her. And with all of the land sacrificing shenanigans, we can easily just sacrifice a land, we get to put a counter on Evolutionary Witness, and then boom, now you can easily cast whatever you want from your graveyard. I don't know why my graveyard's over there, but it definitely is because I keep looking over there when I talk about it. Haywire Mite is also a solid card. It's a 1 CMC artifact creature insect that says whenever Haywire Mite dies, you gain 2 life. You can pay 1 green to sacrifice Haywire Mite to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Again, this is just a solid way to remove some pieces, and it's recurable, so we can easily get it back with all of our Evolutionary Witness effects. Ruthless Technomancer is in the deck for a couple reasons. One, Korvold is in this Precon, and Korvold allows you to draw a card whenever you sacrifice a permanent. If you guys have ever played with Korvold and Ruthless Technomancer in the deck, this is going to make a lot of sense. Also, Ruthless Technomancer is just not a bad card. It's a 4 CMC creature human wizard that says when Ruthless Technomancer enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power. Then you can pay 3 mana, 2 generic and a black, to sacrifice X artifacts, return target creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X can't be 0. So now if we have Korvold on the battlefield and we sacrifice a 5/5, we can easily draw 5 cards by sacrificing those treasure tokens, and that also generates 5 mana. It's an insane combo, or synergy. We'll say it like that because it doesn't really combo. 6 is also amazing in the deck. This is a 3 CMC legendary creature treefolk that basically turns your graveyard into your hand. It has reach, and whenever 6 attacks, you get to mill 3 cards, and you may put a land card from among them into your hand, and then as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. This means we can discard land cards to cast permanent cards from our graveyard. And remember, if you're paying attention, we're playing a lot of land cards from our graveyard anyway. So we can easily discard a land card, play that same land card from our graveyard as our land per turn, and still get to cast something from our graveyard. The synergy's just all coming together here. Orcish Lumberjack is a 1 CMC creature orc that says sacrifice a forest, add 3 mana of any combination of red or green to your mana pool. So now you're just sacrificing a land, adding 3 mana to your mana pool, and then you can cast that same land, or cast, I keep saying cast, play that land from your graveyard. Ignoble Hierarch is a 1 CMC creature goblin shaman that has exalted, which means whenever a creature attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1, and then it just has add 1 black, 1 red, or 1 green to your mana pool. So it's just a mana dork that taps for all 3 Jund colors, and it's pretty cheap right now, so why not pick it up and shove it in this deck? That's going to do it for all the ads, guys. I am going to go ahead and move on to my cuts. I'm just going to give a brief explanation. I don't want people to get too hung up on why I cut these cards, though. Sometimes I'll just cut the wrong card and make one person mad, and they'll be like, now I have to discredit this whole entire video and disagree with him because he cut my one pet card that I really wanted to play in this deck. Guys, if I cut something that you guys want to play with, just play with it. Don't cut it. Keep it in the deck. Cut something else, or even cut something I add. As always, these are just suggestions and you guys can play whatever you want. No reason to crash out in the comment section. Unless you're just having a bad day, then I understand. Augur of Autumn. I went ahead and cut this because I'm just not keen on playing cards from the top of my library anymore. You don't know that it's going to be a creature card. You don't know that it's going to be a land card. You don't even know that you're going to have 3 creatures of different powers to activate it. Now, it's not hard to activate. I don't want to get hung up on that too much, but that is just going to be a solid cut for me. Centaur Vinecrasher. This is a 4 CMC creature with trample, and it's definitely in the deck for the other version. The deck that I think the people that were going for that built this, not to speak too much because I don't know, but I think they wanted a lot of land cards to get in your graveyard and you to benefit off of those land cards in your graveyard. Which, I mean, this guy's pretty solid if that was the goal, because this guy gets a +1/+1 counter put on it equal to the number of land cards in all graveyards whenever it enters the battlefield. The thing is, though, for this deck, the lands are going into the graveyard and then we're instantly playing them again from the graveyard. So including this guy doesn't make a lot of sense because the goal is to not have any land cards in our graveyard until we go for a big reanimation effect, right? Sacrifice all the lands, then bring all the lands instantly back. And in that case, again, we still have 0 cards in our graveyard. So he was a simple cut for me as well. Formless Genesis has Changeling. You can create an excess colorless shapeshifter creature token where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Again, I think this precon was going for having a ton of land cards in the graveyard, and I'm just not keen on that, so we're not going with that strategy. It's just that simple. Escape the Wilds is a 5 CMC sorcery that says exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exiled with it until the end of your turn. You may play an additional land card this turn. So it's a card draw spell that draws you 5 cards and lets you play additional lands. I'm just not super keen on it. We can just include a creature that gives us that effect every single turn instead, and that's just going to allow us to get more consistent value, at least in my mind. Gaze of the Granite. I'm just not very keen on this, especially in a token deck. It says destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. All tokens have converted mana cost 0. So a board wipe that acts kind of one-sided, but it's not really one-sided, I think it's just going to hose us over. So I just went ahead and got rid of it. Groundskeeper is 1 mana, a creature human druid that has 1 generic and 1 red. Return target basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm just not keen on this. There's ways to go infinite with Lion's Eye Diamond, but we're not trying to go infinite with this card. It's just a solid value piece to bring land cards back from the graveyard, but why wouldn't you just play a card that allows you to play lands cards from the graveyard? Which is what we included, so that's why I went ahead and cut that. Loam Crafter is also going to see a cut here. I just think 6 does what Loam Crafter does a little bit better and more repeatable, so we're going to get that card, the Axe. Miltani's going to get a cut because it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land card in your graveyard. We don't really care about that much. It is just a giant creature, though, and it does have the ability to return 2 land cards to their owner's hand and then return Miltani from your graveyard to your hand. But again, I'm not trying to cast a 6 CMC creature over and over again and sack it for value. I would just rather sack a token that we got very massive for value instead. And then I'm not trying to hit people with a giant Miltani either, so easy cut. Night's Whisper, just card advantage I'm not looking for, honestly. I like repeatable card advantage. I'm not saying Night Whisper is a bad card. It's a 2 CMC card that allows you to draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Very good in the early game, not so great in the late game. And then honestly, like I said, I just want that consistent card advantage. I'd rather play an Elemental Bond and just wait on it to generate a lot of mana off of my ballast than play this early game, right? But you do need a good mixture. I think we got it here, so I went ahead and got rid of that. Pest Infestation, 2x and a green, destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantment creatures and create twice X black and green pest creature tokens. When this creature dies, you get to gain 1 life. I went ahead and got rid of this. I added in Haywire Mite instead. Haywire Mite's a little more repeatable, so that's the reasoning there. Planetary Annihilation. This is a 5 CMC sorcery. It's a new one, but I'm not a fan of it in this deck. It says each player chooses 6 lands they control, then sacrifices the rest. Planetary Annihilation deals 6 damage to each creature. So it's a board wipe that forces players to sacrifice any lands they have above 6. My problem with that in this deck is 100% we're going to be that player with more than 6 lands, and then the guy ramping off of artifacts that just played 6 lands naturally because it's turn 6 is just not going to care. It's not going to affect him, and it's going to cause us to sacrifice our lands. That's just my opinion. Maybe it plays out how people think it's going to, but I don't see it being that. Rakdos Charm is going to get cut as well. You get to choose one, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, destroy target artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. Again, we are the token deck here, so I don't really want to be trying to kill people with this. I know people always want to try to kill people with Rakdos Charm. It's not what I'm trying to do. The exile effect's all right, and then additionally the destroy target artifact. I just want more not value, what's the word? Variety whenever I'm talking about a removal spell. Satyr Wayfinder, it's a creature that mills. We're not really focusing on mill here, which is weird to say in a Jund deck. We really are just sacrificing our lands and then taking all those lands and putting them back into play. So mill's not really the goal, so we went ahead and got rid of him. Sprouting Goblin is just a very, very inefficient way to sacrifice lands. It does give you card advantage though, because you pay 1 red to sacrifice a land and draw a card. But again, I want my land sack abilities to be vast in this deck. Tireless Tracker, I think the card advantage is just a little bit slow. Power Creep, sadly, is getting a hold of this guy, but he's also a budget card now. So for all of you budget players, I think he's very solid there. But I think this deck is doing a lot more explosive things than having to want to pay 2 to sack a clue to draw a card to put a 1/1 counter on this guy, right? I just think we're doing more powerful stuff than that. Urg is another creature that has power equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. And again, we kind of went away from that strategy. We're focusing on putting our land cards in the graveyard and then instantly reanimating them. So we're going to cut that. Windgrace's Judgment is just super expensive for a removal spell, in my opinion. So we're going to head and axe that as well. And then Worldbreaker, again, just super expensive for a removal spell. Yes, I know we can sacrifice a land here, but you have to spend 3 mana to do it. And one of those lands has to be colorless. So you might not even be able to activate that ability. So again, that guy was an easy cut. And then after that, we're cutting 5 lands. I think 37 is totally fine, especially in the strategy. Remember, in this strategy, we're focused on playing additional lands and we're focusing on sacking those lands and playing them from the graveyard. So we don't need an abundance of lands to always have lands in our hand to play. We can just sack lands and play them from our graveyard. So we're going with that route instead of just having 47 lands, or a little bit hyperbolic, but not crazy. I think there's 42 lands in this deck. So instead of having 42 lands, we're going down to 37 and we're going to focus on sacrificing them instead of just, putting a ton of lands. And this is going to actually reduce the odds of us getting land flooded. So I'm pretty happy to do that. With that being said, guys, that's the end of this Precon upgrade. Super long video, or super long for me, I guess. I usually don't do 24-minute long videos, but everybody's been asking for me to talk about why I'm cutting these cards that I'm cutting. So I went through it today. If I get torn apart in the comment section below because I cut 1 card, we're getting rid of this segment. It's gonna be done. It's not coming back. With that being said, guys, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.